We all know that the cell is the basic unit of life. But why is it called the basic unit, and how can something so tiny control life itself? In this upcoming series, we'll explore that in depth. So, let's begin with a simple question. What are cells? Cells are microscopic structures that form the foundation of all living organisms. They carry out every activity necessary for life, from producing energy to growing, repairing, and reproducing. When we examine the levels of biological organization, the cell is the level where life truly begins. In unicellular organisms, a single cell performs all life processes on its own. But in multicellular organisms like plants and animals, millions to trillions of cells work together in coordination to sustain life. Just as bricks build the walls of a building, cells build complex living organisms. From the simplest bacterium to the largest animal on Earth, and from microscopic algae to towering trees, every living organism is made of cells. When we say a cell carries out all activities of life, we mean that nature has placed an entire system inside something unimaginably small. Think of a cell as a city. A city has a power plant that generates energy. A cell has mitochondria that produce energy. A city has complex road networks and transportation systems. A cell has intricate pathways that transport materials. A city has a control center that manages operations. A cell has a nucleus that acts as the control unit. All of these complex systems exist within a space too small to see with the naked eye. That is not ordinary. That is precision. That is design at its finest. And this is just the beginning. In the next part, we will explore how scientists discovered cells and how this discovery changed biology forever. But if cells are so tiny that we cannot see them with the naked eye, an important question arises. How did scientists discover them in the first place? The discovery of cells became possible only after the invention of one important scientific tool, the microscope. In 1665, Robert Hooke, an English scientist, examined a thin slice of cork under a microscope. What he saw surprised him. Instead of a solid structure, the cork appeared to contain many tiny box-like compartments arranged side by side. These compartments reminded him of the small rooms used by monks in monasteries. Because of this resemblance, Hooke called them cells. However, the structures he observed were actually dead plant cells. Hooke had only seen the empty walls of cells, not the living contents inside them. Still, his observation introduced the world to the concept of the cell. A few years later, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch scientist, built powerful microscopes using carefully polished lenses. When he observed water samples, plaque from teeth, and other materials, he saw something extraordinary. He observed tiny living organisms moving under the microscope. These organisms were far too small to be seen by the naked eye. Leeuwenhoek called them animalcules, meaning tiny animals. Today we know them as microorganisms. This was the first time scientists had ever seen living cells. These early discoveries opened the door to a completely new understanding of living organisms. Scientists began to realize that life was not made of solid material, but instead was built from countless microscopic units working together. But this raised an even bigger question. Are all living organisms made of cells? The answer to that question eventually led to one of the most important principles in biology, the cell theory. Over the next 2 centuries, scientists carefully studied plants and animals to find the answer. Their observations led to the development of one of the most important ideas in biology, the cell theory. In 1838, Matthias Schleiden, a German scientist, studied plant tissues under the microscope. After examining many different plant samples, he concluded that all plants are made of cells. In 1839, Theodor Schwann, a year later, another scientist, studied animal tissues and discovered that animals are also made of cells. This was a groundbreaking realization. It meant that both plants and animals, despite their differences, shared the same fundamental unit of structure, the cell. In 1855, Rudolf Virchow, a scientist, added another important idea. He stated that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. In simple terms, this means that new cells are formed only from already existing cells. Together, these discoveries formed what we now call the cell theory. Cell theory can be summarized into three fundamental statements. All living organisms are made up of one or more cells. Some organisms like bacteria consist of just a single cell. Others like plants and animals are made of millions or even trillions of cells. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. This means that the cell is the smallest unit capable of carrying out all the essential processes of life. All cells arise from pre-existing cells. Cells do not appear spontaneously. They are produced when existing cells divide. Cell theory changed the way scientists understood life. It showed that despite the enormous diversity of living organisms from microscopic bacteria to giant trees and animals, life follows a common biological principle. Every living thing begins with a cell. From that single unit, life grows, develops, and becomes the complex organisms we see around us. But if all living things are made of cells, another important question arises. Are all cells the same? The answer is no. Based on their structure and level of complexity, cells are classified into two major categories. First, prokaryotic cells, and second, eukaryotic cells. This classification helps scientists understand how different organisms are organized at the cellular level. Prokaryotic cells are the simplest and most primitive type of cells. These cells do not have a true nucleus. Instead of being enclosed within a nuclear membrane, the genetic material is located in a region called the nucleoid. Prokaryotic cells also lack membrane-bound organelles such as mitochondria or Golgi bodies. Despite their simple structure, these cells are capable of carrying out all the basic activities necessary for life. Examples of organisms with prokaryotic cells include bacteria and archaea. These organisms are usually unicellular, meaning the entire organism consists of just one cell. Yet even a single prokaryotic cell can grow, reproduce, obtain energy, and respond to its environment. Eukaryotic cells are larger and more complex. Unlike prokaryotic cells, they contain a true nucleus surrounded by a nuclear membrane. This nucleus stores the genetic material and controls the activities of the cell. Eukaryotic cells also contain membrane-bound organelles, each performing specific functions inside the cell. Examples include mitochondria for energy production, endoplasmic reticulum for synthesis and transport, Golgi apparatus for packaging and distribution of materials. Eukaryotic cells are found in plants, animals, fungi, and protists. Many of these organisms are multicellular, where specialized cells work together to form tissues and organs. In simple terms, prokaryotic cells are small, simple, and lack a true nucleus. Eukaryotic cells are larger, more complex, and contain a well-defined nucleus along with specialized organelles. This difference represents one of the most fundamental divisions in the living world. Understanding these two types of cells helps us see how life ranges from simple microscopic organisms to highly complex living systems. But now another question appears. What is the size of a cell? Cells are microscopic structures that form the foundation of all living organisms. They carry out every activity necessary for life, from producing energy to growing, repairing, and reproducing. Cells are extremely small, so small that most of them cannot be seen with the naked eye. To observe them, scientists use powerful instruments called microscopes. Despite their tiny size, cells carry out all the complex processes necessary for life. But cells are not all the same size. Some cells are extremely small, while others can be comparatively larger. Understanding the size of cells helps us appreciate just how incredible it is that all the machinery of life fits into such a microscopic space. So, let's explore how big or how small cells actually are. Most cells measure only a few micrometers in size, which is why they cannot be seen with the naked eye. To understand just how tiny this is, Consider this example. A single human hair is about 70 micrometers thick. This means that several cells could fit across the width of just one strand of hair. For instance, the size of red blood cells is about 7 to 8 micrometers in diameter. Many bacteria are even smaller, usually measuring around 1 to 5 micron. In comparison, most eukaryotic cells are larger, typically ranging from 10 to 100 micrometers in size. But despite their microscopic size, there is one cell on Earth that is large enough to be seen and even touched with our bare hands. Do you know which cell it is? Write your answer in the comment section. And if you are not sure, don't worry. I will reveal the answer at the end of this video. Now, let's talk about the structure of the cell. Although cells vary in shape and size, most of them share a basic structural organization. A typical cell is mainly composed of three fundamental parts. In simple terms, the outer part is the cell membrane, the middle region is the cytoplasm, and the innermost part is the nucleus. Now let's briefly understand each of these components one by one. The cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane, forms the outer boundary of the cell. It acts as a protective barrier that separates the internal environment of the cell from the external surroundings. However, the cell membrane is not just a simple wall. It is selectively permeable, which means it carefully controls which substances enter and leave the cell. In this way, the cell membrane helps maintain the internal balance of the cell. Next, we have the cytoplasm. Inside the cell membrane, there is a jelly-like substance known as the cytoplasm. It fills the interior of the cell and provides a medium in which many cellular activities take place. The cytoplasm contains many important structures called organelles. Each of these organelles perform specific tasks that help the cell function properly. In fact, many essential chemical reactions necessary for life occur within the cytoplasm. Finally, we have the nucleus, which is the innermost part of the cell. The nucleus is often referred to as the control center of the cell because it contains the cell's genetic material or DNA. This DNA carries the instructions for growth, development, and reproduction. By controlling gene expression and cellular activities, the nucleus ensures that the cell functions in an organized and coordinated way. So, in simple terms, the cell membrane protects the cell and regulates the movement of substances. The cytoplasm hosts most of the internal activities of the cell. The nucleus controls the cell's functions. But the story of the cell does not end here. Inside the cytoplasm, there are many specialized structures called organelles, and each of them performs a unique function. In the upcoming videos, we will explore these organelles one by one, discussing their structure, functions, and detailed roles in the life of the cell. For now, this was a brief introduction to the basic structure of a cell. But have you ever wondered how such complex systems work so efficiently? When we examine the levels of biological organization, the cell is the level where life truly begins. In unicellular organisms, a single cell performs all life processes on its own. But in multicellular organisms like plants and animals, millions to trillions of cells work together in coordination to sustain life. In biology, there is a fundamental principle that helps explain this efficiency. It is known as the division of labor. Division of labor means that different parts of a system specialize in performing specific tasks. By sharing responsibilities, the system becomes more organized and much more efficient. This principle operates at two important levels in biology: within cells and across cells in multicellular organisms. Within a cell, the division of labor is carried out by specialized structures called organelles. Each organelle performs a distinct function that is necessary for the survival of the cell. For example, mitochondria produce energy for the cell and are often called the powerhouses of the cell. Ribosomes are responsible for protein synthesis, producing the proteins that the cell needs to function. The Golgi apparatus modifies and packages proteins so they can be transported to different parts of the cell. And the endoplasmic reticulum helps in the synthesis and transport of important molecules. By dividing these tasks among different organelles, the cell can operate in a highly organized and efficient manner. But this principle does not stop at the cellular level. In multicellular organisms, the division of labor extends across different types of cells. Different cells become specialized to perform specific roles within the body. For instance, red blood cells are specialized to transport oxygen throughout the body. Muscle cells are designed for contraction and movement. Nerve cells or neurons transmit electrical signals that allow communication within the body. And skin cells provide protection by forming a barrier between the body and the external environment. So whether we look inside a single cell or at the millions of cells that make up a complex organism, the same principle applies. Division of labor allows biological systems to function efficiently and in a highly coordinated way. Now let's come back to the question I asked earlier in the video. Is there a cell that we can see with the naked eye and even touch with our bare hands? The answer is an egg. Yes, a hen's egg is actually a single cell. Even though it looks large, the yolk of the egg is one cell that can develop into a chick. And here's another interesting fact. The largest single cell found on Earth is the ostrich egg. If you found this video helpful, click here to watch more cell-related videos.